Pleasant greetings, y'all. Proud Filipina Sharm Zispina here, who's reported on the President's State of the Nation speech on the last Monday of July each year since I made the move to join media. But over in the land of the free and home of the brave, a union of over 50 independent states, its president is constitutionally bound, just as ours to apprise the citizenry through a joint session of Congress on the status quo of affairs of the country. And U.S. President Joe Biden's speech in February this year in front of a sharply divided and highly partisan legislature drew unusual, even unethical behavior from certain members of Congress, as summed up in today's Inside Story presentation.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
Joe Biden presses bipartisanship by touting its successes.
But now we're coming back because we came together and passed the bipartisan infrastructure law.
Halfway through his first term, the U.S. president makes his case to the American people and a rowdy opposition. And he wants more time to finish the job.
The State of the Union is strong.
Now, on the Inside Story, State of the Union.
I'm Patsy Widakuswara, VOA White House Bureau Chief. This week, an American political tradition enshrined in the U.S. Constitution that the President of the United States shall from time to time give to the Congress information of the State of the Union. President Joe Biden delivered his second State of the Union address on Tuesday, the third time speaking before a joint session of Congress since coming into office. Now, halfway through his four-year term, Biden faced a divided Congress and a polarized nation as a likely candidate for re-election. During his second State of the Union speech on Tuesday, his third address to a joint session of Congress since taking office, President Joe Biden stayed with his unity agenda.
Speaker, I don't want to ruin your reputation, but I look forward to working with you.
Biden touted increased American manufacturing and legislation that invests in renewable energy production, domestic semiconductor industry, and infrastructure to compete against China.
We used to be number one in the world in infrastructure. We've sunk to 13th in the world. The United States of America, 13th in the world in infrastructure, modern infrastructure. But now we're coming back because we came together and passed the bipartisan infrastructure law.
Addressing high inflation, Biden argued the problem is global, caused by the pandemic and the war on Ukraine, and focused instead on low unemployment.
We've created, with the help of many people in this room, 12 million new jobs, more jobs created in 2 years than any president's created in 4 years.
He highlighted steps his administration took to erase federal student loan debt, increase the number of insured Americans, implement COVID relief programs, and lower prescription drug prices. But can he convince Americans things are looking up? Republicans are determined to stop him, with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Arkansas governor and former White House press secretary under President Donald Trump, delivering the GOP response.
In the radical left's America, Washington taxes you and lights your hard-earned money on fire. But you get crushed with high gas prices, empty grocery shelves, and our children are taught to hate one another on account of their race, but not to love one another or our great country.
With Republicans controlling the House of Representatives following the November election, new House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has promised renewed scrutiny on the administration, including on the classified documents found in Biden's home, the billions of dollars of aid to Ukraine, and what they say is his weak response to a Chinese surveillance balloon, which the U.S. recently shot down. Despite low unemployment and gas prices down sharply from a record high in mid-2022, Biden's approval ratings remain at 40%. While his speech is unlikely to change that, it does signal that he is likely to run again in 2024.
He didn't say if he is or he isn't, but he made the case for why he should. right? Which is that he can see what needs to be done. He's had all of these successes so far. He's had all of this achievement, but there's still a lot more that he wants to get done.
As a gesture of solidarity to Ukraine, First Lady Jill Biden again invited the country's ambassador Oksana Markarova and parents of Tyree Nichols, the black man who was beaten by Tennessee police officers and died days later.
When police officers or police departments violate the public trust, they must be held accountable.
Following recent shootings in California, Biden again called on Congress to ban assault-style rifles. He urged Republicans to come up with immigration reform, debt reduction proposals, and vowed to protect reproductive rights.
Make no mistake about it. If Congress passes a national ban, I will veto it.
But bipartisan legislation is unlikely under a divided government. In a few months, Biden is set to clash with Republicans who are demanding spending cuts before agreeing to pass a debt ceiling hike to prevent the country from defaulting. State of the Union addresses are traditionally focused on domestic issues. But for the second straight year, foreign policy troubles cast a shadow over Biden's speech. Last year, Russia attacked Ukraine days before the address. This year, it's China's balloon that popped the president's good news bubble. VOA senior diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain drills down on foreign policy issues.
As President Joe Biden spoke to a joint session of Congress Tuesday evening on the State of the Nation, tensions with China loomed large after a suspected Chinese surveillance balloon captured the attention of both lawmakers and ordinary Americans. Without mentioning the balloon specifically, Biden sought to reassure Americans while sending this message to China.
I'm committed to work with China where we can advance American interests and benefit the world, but make no mistake about it. As we made clear last week, if China threatens our sovereignty, we will act to protect our country, and we did.
On Saturday, a U.S. fighter jet shot down the balloon in midair over the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of South Carolina. China has called the U.S. shooting down of the balloon unacceptable and an overreaction. Some Republicans criticized Biden for not ordering the balloon shot down earlier as it traversed the country. They may be looking for a tougher stance on China. Michael Kugelman of the Wilson Center told VOA.
So he was not taking a forceful hawkish position. He was leaving open some space for conciliation. And I really don't think those members of Congress that want a more hardline stand would have been satisfied with what he said tonight.
Russia's war against Ukraine was also featured in Biden's address. The U.S. has committed more than $27 billion in security assistance to Ukraine. Biden said Russian President Vladimir Putin's invasion 1 year ago was a test that America passed.
We united NATO. We built a global coalition. We stood against Putin's aggression. We stood with the Ukrainian people. Tonight, we're once again joined by Ukrainian's ambassador to the United States. She represents not just her nation, but the courage of her people.
Some Republicans have been skeptical of military aid to Ukraine, but that was not the case when Republicans in the chamber, including House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, appeared to strongly support Biden's remarks.
I have to say, I saw a lot more support coming from the Republican side of the aisle when he was speaking about Ukraine, particularly at the moment when he said, "We are in it as long as it takes." This is something that we have heard the Republican Party push back on, specifically saying that there wasn't a blank check for Ukraine.
Apart from the war in Ukraine and a long-planned pivot to Asia, President Biden is planning for the first visit to sub-Saharan Africa by an American president since 2015. Cindy Sain, VOA News, Washington.
President Biden took full advantage of the State of the Union address to lay out an array of policy measures for Congress to consider, and issues you will likely hear more about during the 2024 presidential campaign.
The story of America is a story of progress and resilience, of always moving forward, of never, ever giving up. It's a story unique among all nations. We're the only country that has emerged from every crisis we've ever entered stronger than we got into it. Look, folks, that's what we're doing again. 2 years ago, the economy was reeling. I stand here tonight after we've created, with the help of many people in this room, 12 million new jobs. More jobs created in 2 years than any president's created in 4 years because of you all, because of the American people. And 2 years ago, COVID had shut down, our businesses were closed, our schools were robbed of so much, and today, COVID no longer controls our lives. And 2 years ago, democracy faced its greatest threat to the Civil War, and today, though bruised, our democracy remains unbowed and unbroken. As we gather here tonight, we're writing the next chapter in the great American story, a story of progress and resilience. When world leaders ask me to define America, and they do, believe it or not, I can define it in one word, and I mean this: possibilities. We don't think anything is beyond our capacity. Everything is a possibility. You know, we're often told that Democrats and Republicans can't work together. But over the past 2 years, we've proved the cynics and naysayers wrong. Yes, we disagreed plenty. And yes, there were times when Democrats went alone. But time and again, Democrats and Republicans came together to defend a stronger and safer Europe. You came together to pass once in a generation infrastructure law, building bridges connecting our nation and our people. We came together to pass the most significant law ever, helping victims exposed to toxic burn pits. And in fact, it was important. And in fact, I signed over 300 bipartisan pieces of legislation since becoming president, from reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act, to the Electoral Count Reform Act, the Respect for Marriage Act that protects the right to marry the person you love. I ran for president to fundamentally change things, to make sure our economy works for everyone, so we can all feel that pride in what we do, to build an economy from the bottom up and the middle out, not from the top down. Because when the middle class does well, the poor have a ladder up, and the wealthy still do very well. We all do well. But I think the people sent us a clear message. Fighting for the sake of fighting, power for the sake of power, conflict for the sake of conflict gets us nowhere. That's always been my vision of our country, and I know it's many of yours. To restore the soul of this nation, to rebuild the backbone of America, America's middle class, and to unite the country. We've been sent here to finish the job, in my view. It's never, ever been a good bet to bet against America. Never. Our strength is not just the example of our power, but the power of our example.
For the first time in his presidency, Joe Biden spoke to a politically divided Congress. Republicans control the House of Representatives, while Democrats have the U.S. Senate. And despite calls for civility from House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, several Republicans heckled and booed the president. One congresswoman shouted liar as Biden asserted that Republicans want social spending programs, Medicare, and Social Security to sunset, drawing a raucous uproar. Biden swiped back with his own quips and jabs. The evening underscored the tense relationship between the White House and congressional Republicans, and perhaps signaled that the American tradition of lawmakers listening with decorum as the president speaks is now broken. VOA congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson brings the lawmakers' reactions after the speech.
President Joe Biden with a message of bipartisanship for the U.S. Congress Tuesday night.
If we could work together the last Congress, there's no reason we can't work together and find consensus on important things in this Congress as well.
But on Capitol Hill, now divided between a Democratic majority U.S. Senate and a Republican majority U.S. House of Representatives, lawmakers disagreed on the big issues Biden said the country needed to address.
The Republicans chant this close the border, without really conceding that that is not the solution to the problem. I think we can get more serious about the border, other ports of entry like airports, but we also have to really get down to our dreamers, those several million people, some of them adults by now in their 30s, who came to this country through no fault of their own.
But some Republicans are skeptical of Biden's request for more funding for border security, fearing it would be used in ways that encourage rather than discourage migration.
If we give them more money, they're going to use it to count more and facilitate the processing of more immigrants coming in. Instead of stopping the immigration and disincentivizing it, that's where that money will be used.
Biden said backing Ukraine is a key U.S. national security interest.
Putin's invasion has been a test for the ages.
This is our reputation at stake in front of the world, in front of the global community. We stand for democracy. We're the beacon of hope to democracies around the world. We must stand with Ukraine.
But House Republicans want more oversight of U.S. aid to help combat the Russian invasion.
What's the plan? To suggest that it's just open-ended, a blank check in Ukraine. Now remember, when we ship armament to Ukraine, we don't control where that armament's going.
Republicans also say that Biden did not react quickly enough to the suspected Chinese surveillance balloon that was shot down last week.
I think he's very tentative. He doesn't want to provoke, but by doing so, he's actually tempting the Chinese to do more. I think they sense weakness.
But Biden argued the United States is in competition, not conflict with China.
The president did the right thing and waited till it left our coast and it was in a safe place to shoot it out of the sky, and we did. And I think we showed China, Russia, and the world that if you come and try these type of maneuvers in our country, that we're going to take repercussions.
The divided Congress will face a major test in late May when the debt ceiling must be raised to avoid a U.S. government default. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Capitol Hill.
Despite repeated calls for bipartisanship, President Biden knows that the Republican-controlled House of Representatives is intent on investigating him and his administration. VOA congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson explains their concerns about immigration, political favoritism, and Biden's handling of classified documents.
A Republican majority U.S. House of Representatives was sworn in last month.
That you take this obligation freely,
ushering in a new era of divided government in Washington, D.C. And with it, Republicans pledging to fulfill Congress's role of oversight of the White House.
I do not think any American believes that justice should not be equal to all. And we found from this administration what happened before every single election, whatever comes out that they utilize to try to falsify it, they try to have different standards for their own beliefs. That doesn't work in America.
Republicans argue the Biden administration has abused its powers, from the way it has handled mass migration at America's southern border.
Month after month after month, we have set records for migrants coming into the country. And frankly, I think it's intentional. I don't know how anyone with common sense or logic can reach any other conclusion. It seems deliberate, it seems premeditated.
To the alleged weaponization of the federal government for political purposes.
We're going to be returning this committee to its core mission, and that is to ensure that taxpayer dollars are not being mismanaged, abused, or wasted, to shine a light in the darkness of the federal bureaucracy to prevent corruption and self-dealing, to make sure our federal government is working efficiently for the American people.
Republicans also plan investigations into the president's own family, including accusations his son Hunter Biden improperly benefited from his father's positions. Oversight of the executive branch is a key part of Congress's role, and analysts say these investigations are common when the U.S. government has divided party rule.
Even in a polarized era, a congressional investigation can do some good, but in order for it to have a truly beneficial impact, both parties have to cooperate.
But Democrats say the probes will unfairly target the president.
And it's very unfortunate that we've seen this extreme MAGA Republican agenda, which is apparently anchored in impeachment and investigation, focused on witch hunts, not working families.
Any legislative fixes that come out of the House hearings won't be passed in the Democratic-controlled U.S. Senate.
There's a broad realm here for lawmakers to use this subpoena power to force people to come to speak to them, even though no one expects a real legislative change to occur because of those investigations.
The discovery of classified documents at Biden's residence will also prompt a House investigation, one Republicans hope will keep the focus on the president ahead of the 2024 elections.
Congressional investigations, we can show historically, do dampen presidential approval, right? They can really tarnish what the public thinks about the president.
The first subpoenas stemming from House investigations of the Biden Justice Department were issued last week. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Washington.
President Ronald Reagan started the tradition in 1982, inviting to the State of the Union a man who dove into an icy river to save the life of a woman after an airplane crash. Since then, heroes and many others have been invited to be recognized by the president in his address. This year's guests included the man who disarmed a mass shooter in California and the family of murdered Memphis man Tyree Nichols.
Joining us tonight is Brandon Say, a 26-year-old hero. Brandon put his college dreams on hold to be at his mom's side when she was dying from cancer. Brandon now works at the dance studio started by his grandparents. And 2 weeks ago, during the Lunar New Year celebrations, he heard the studio door close, and he saw a man standing there pointing a semi-automatic pistol at him. He thought he was going to die, but he thought about the people inside. And in that instant, he found the courage to act and wrestled a semi-automatic pistol away from the gunman who had already killed 11 people in another dance studio. 11. He saved lives. It's time we do the same. Ban assault weapons now. Ban them now. Once and for all. I led the fight to do that in 1994. And in 10 years, that ban was law, mass shootings went down. After we let it expire in the Republican administration, mass shootings tripled. Let's finish the job and ban these assault weapons. Joining us tonight are the parents of Tyree Nichols. Welcome. We had to bury Tyree last week. As many of you personally know, there's no words to describe the heartache or grief of losing a child. But imagine if you lost that child at the hands of the law. Imagine having to worry whether your son or daughter came home from walking down the street, or playing in the park, or just driving a car. Most of us in here have never had to have the talk that brown and black parents have had to have with their children. Bo, Hunter, Ashley, my children, I never had to have the talk with them. I never had to tell them if a police officer pulls you over, turn your interior lights on right away. Don't reach for your license. Keep your hands on the steering wheel. Imagine having to worry like that every single time your kid got in a car. Here's what Tyree's mother shared with me when I spoke to her. When I asked her how she finds the courage to carry on and speak out. The faith of God, she said her son was, quote, a beautiful soul, and something good will come of this. Imagine how much courage and character that takes. It's up to us, to all of us. We all want the same thing. Neighborhoods free of violence. Law enforcement who earns the community's trust. Just as every cop, when they pin on that badge in the morning, has a right to be able to go home at night, so does everybody else out there. Our children have a right to come home safely. Equal protection under the law is a covenant we have with each other in America. But what happened to Tyree in Memphis happens too often. We have to do better. All of us in this chamber, we need to rise to this moment. We can't turn away. Let's do what we know in our hearts that we need to do. Let's come together to finish the job on police reform. Do something.
Follow us on social media and stay up to date with the latest U.S. and world news at voanews.com. Catch up on past episodes on our free streaming service, VOA Plus. And for all things White House related, my Twitter is PWDahuswara. Thanking you on behalf of my colleagues who brought you today's show, I'm White House Bureau Chief Patsy Widakuswara. See you next week for the Inside Story.
And that's a wrap for today's show. Perhaps you came out a tad more enlightened as much as we did and had fun bringing it forward to you. We look forward to our next offering. And don't forget to always work hard and aim high. Stay true and turn that frown upside down while you catch the news right here on PTV. This has been Sharm Zespina for Stories from the Grid.